and journalist and author Janelle Aldred. Welcome back to both of you. And in the last hour, we talked about a couple of the front pages focusing on the big summit between Putin and Trump on Friday and the fallout since. And again, a lot of the front pages dominated by this, plenty more we didn't get to. Here's the Mail on Sunday, for example. Zelensky trapped in Trump and Putin vice. Why are they saying that?
So this sort of captures the idea that a peace deal will be decided above the head of Zelensky, of course, is one of the main protagonists in this, and whose country has been savagely invaded, let us not forget, and that invasion is ongoing by Putin. In Russia. It wouldn't just be over his head, but European leaders, I think, are terrified that it will be decided over their heads. There is still a chance that Starmer and possibly others might turn up with Zelensky in the Oval Office in America tomorrow when Zelensky meets Trump. Again, we all remember what happened earlier in the year where he was humiliated by a combination of J.D. Vance and Donald Trump. It is remarkable that sort of 24 hours or so out from this summit, such a critical summit, we still don't know whether our own Prime Minister will go there, which suggests chaos. Trump's fans would argue this is all part of the art of the deal. The real concerns are that Ukraine will be forced effectively to give up territory, including Donetsk and other parts of the Donbas region in the east, in exchange for what could be a very fragile peace. But one positive in this would be if Trump, and it seems like he may now be getting on board with this idea of guaranteeing Ukraine's security for whatever remains under their sovereignty. And that would be potentially style security, where if Russia were to make further incursions later on, America would then get involved. And that would effectively, you would think, prevent Putin from doing that, because we don't want a hot war between America and Russia. But the idea that Ukraine could give up parts of its sovereign territory, I think, will stick in the craw of many of our viewers today. And the front pages across the political divide, or certainly I think it's mostly the right-wing front pages that have been dealing with this today, they're all united in the sort of disgust at the idea of Putin getting any sort of victory.
Well, yes, and a lot of the commentators were quite upset with how the summit concluded. President Trump had said there'd be severe consequences if a ceasefire wasn't agreed. Now he's saying, actually, we're going to go straight to a peace deal and a ceasefire can come later, which goes directly against what President Zelensky wants. And now it's emerged since that summit, this suggestion that you were talking about, Matthew, that President Putin's price of peace is to take the Donbass, which includes Donetsk and Luhansk. So there's a lot of pressure on Zelensky as he goes into this meeting.
I know, and I do kind of feel for him, and it's almost like he's going into HR with the boss, you know,
yes.
And he's going unrepresented, so maybe Keir Starmer might be representative to speak for him, because we all remember the scenes of him basically being kind of ganged up on in the Oval Office before. He will not want that scene, but Donald Trump can also not afford that scene, because I think if he allows that to happen again, he knows that he will be loading everybody's thinking, because I think he will be quite cross that he hasn't managed to get a deal yesterday, because that was his big
But he's putting the pressure on Zelensky,
He's putting the pressure on it. He said Zelensky needs to get it done and the European leaders need to come and help. But Donald Trump has effectively taken Zelensky and the European leaders out of the summit and gone to try to get the deal over and above their heads. So I actually think, although it's not a good look for Donald Trump, who said he was going to sort this out day one, what day are we now, 100? So he hasn't sorted it out. But also, I think it's good that he hasn't sorted it out. It is very good this was not divvied up yesterday and a done deal, because I think that would have been an even worse outcome for Ukraine if they had done that.
You asked why it's a vice-like deal for Zelensky, and I think the answer is because if Trump presents it to Zelensky in the Oval Office as, here is peace, what do you say? And Zelensky says no. By the way, I can't say yes because I can't just give up chunks of my territory, perhaps even without a referendum, part of the Ukrainian constitution, as I understand it. He is suddenly painted by Trump and by Trump fans as the person who's against peace, which is patently absurd.
True, but we all know that's not true. And I think this is the hard thing. We're living in a dual reality where we're kind of watching a saga occur and words being used about this thing. And, you know, Zelensky should never have done it and he should not, if you go back to the root cause of why this has happened. I think most of us right-thinking people who have watched this all unfold understand that what Trump is saying and offering is just not possible. It's not possible.
On the other hand, we want peace, don't we? Because we want people to stop dying. So even though the scenes of Trump meeting Putin and rolling out the red carpet, calling him the boss, Boris Johnson says in the Mail on Sunday today that this is sort of vomit-inducing, he also says, but actually it's necessary.
Diplomacy is needed. You need to talk to people if you're going to make the war end. Yeah, is that message. We will be discussing this a lot in the next few days, of course, but let's move on to some of the other issues on the papers as well. And Janelle, the front page of the Sunday Mirror quotes the former Labour leader, Neil Kinnock, once again.
Yes, and he's looking for a Robin Hood-style tax, is what he's kind of saying. He's saying that the rich are getting richer, their backs are the broadest, the two-child cap benefit needs to be removed. He's saying 14 years of austerity, too many children have been pushed into poverty, and apparently removing this cap would lift 600,000 children out of poverty. And I think it's coming at a really interesting time for the Labour Party, who are actually winning in the war of what's going on in the world stage. There's actually not a lot of headlines and scrutiny on them as much all the time as there would be was everything else not going on. But it's just something that needs to... Personally, I think needs to happen if Labour want to keep their core voters. They're really going to need to think in the next 12 to 18 months about how they are going to kind of turn the tide on this kind of view that they are actually conservative light fiscally.
Really important policy area, but really, really difficult politics as well for Labour, because we've seen their welfare bill crash and burn, and there seems to be a sort of broad cross-party consensus that something needs to be done on the welfare state. They weren't able to drive through those reforms in anything like their entirety, and now a former Labour leader is coming out and saying, actually, we want to widen the welfare net on an issue where most Labour MPs, and Starmer, I suspect himself, will have wanted to be able to do this. They want to scrap this.
He said that, I think. He just said it's an expensive thing.
And yet here they are in power, grappling with really difficult choices. It's not at all fun for them.
No, and with the budget upcoming as well, we'll get a real sense of just how tough finances are. We don't have a huge amount of time, but just rattle through a couple of the stories on which kind of paint a picture of how Labour is trying to tackle the threat of reform. Matthew, first of all, in The Telegraph, a story about Angela Rayner and her approach.
Yeah, so we saw Peter Kyle, who's the Science and Technology Secretary of State, didn't we? And we saw Jess Phillips attack Farage over his opposition to the online safety laws. And now Angela Rayner has waded in as well, effectively saying that Farage's opposition will make it much worse for women on the issue of what is colloquially called revenge porn, a really damaging thing that far too many men indulge in. But this is part, if we're looking at the politics, this is part of a wider picture of the threat that Labour completely understands that reform poses them, because reform in every poll, I think, since May have been ahead. They've got an 8-point lead in I think, a recent YouGov poll. Labour sense the threat and they feel that they've got support on the online safety laws, and so they're going to hammer Farage over it.
Well, yes, and he maintains issues of freedom of speech are more important, and acknowledges those other issues are there, but doesn't necessarily offer a solution to them. But a similar kind of line in the Sunday Times involving different people.
So they've linked Nigel Farage to Andrew Tate, and to be fair, he's kind of said, you know, that Andrew Tate is a voice for the emasculated man. You know, you can't be a bloke, you can't be laddish.
He said this
you can't
in a podcast a few years ago.
You can't do fun bloke things. Some of those fun bloke things weren't fun for everybody else, which is why we've asked people to stop doing it. But yeah, I do think what you are seeing, and there's another story in the Mirror where they're linking Farage to Tate and similar kind of issues. And yes, they are definitely going on the attack for Farage at the moment and kind of showing that he doesn't maybe have the policies that they put out and he doesn't have a real plan. But in this one, Andrew Tate, who I think most people think is kind of somewhat unpleasant fellow, they're just kind of saying that basically Nigel Farage is sticking up for him, and it comes back to the Me Too, probably their core audience. This is definitely in contradiction to the things that would be Labour values.
And very interesting.
We haven't got time. I'm sure it's very interesting. Can you tell us that very interesting thing next hour?
I'll hold it.
Hold it. But we will see you next hour. Thanks very much indeed for now.
Hear that whistle?